Let's show you this map posted by NASCAR Man of all the IndyCar tracks on the schedule. There you see it and where they're located. As you can see, plenty of races in the Midwest, in the South, and representation on the West Coast. Many people have, obviously, including myself, been wanting to see more ovals on the schedule, and particularly races back on the East Coast. Instead of that, for now, we get a third race in California and a fourth race on the West Coast with next year's All-Star race at the Thermal Club. Matt, we also can't forget about the possibility of a postseason exhibition race in Argentina. Should IndyCar prioritize other things before adding an All-Star race and a potential international non-points event in South America?
100% yes. The Argentina thing's been bubbling away in the background for some time. It looks like, by the sound of things from the latest reporting from people that were at Laguna at the weekend and previous, Marshall Pruitt being probably the main man on this one, that it's going to happen in November at some stage at Termas de Rio Hondo, where we have MotoGP. Decent track, could prove to be a good race, nice and wide. So if there's any shenanigans like we saw at Laguna Seca at the weekend, at least we might get away with some contacts and people flying off the road. But to the schedule kind of point to this, we need to go back to Watkins Glen. We need to have a race in the Northeast or that kind of corner of the country. I'd love to have another race in Canada if we can manage that, either at Montreal, go back to Vancouver maybe, like we had in the 90s. But my schedule point from before was, and I'm kind of basing this on last year, pre-season testing happened at the Thermal Club. It's out west. They went all the way back to St. Pete for the first race. And now we're going to go back to the Thermal Club to do the All-Star race. Then go to Texas. Then go to Laguna. Is apparently going to be round 2, so kind of west again. Then go back east to Texas and go back west to Long Beach, and then go back east again to Barber. The IndyCar schedule is just messed up. I know they try and get it all done and out of the way for football. They kind of clashed with that at the weekend, which was a bit untimely. Especially as it was on at the same time as the Cup race at Kansas. More about that in Hots and Knots later on. But yeah, they do need a couple more tracks races in the States. I remember me and Matthew Owens doing that St. Pete race last year, talking about the schedule, and we said they can go from St. Pete and go to Homestead, add another oval in. I know it's 2 races in Florida and they're fairly close together in terms of geography, but another couple of races on the east side would be good. And yeah, we need Watkins Glen. Matthew says we need Richmond, and of course they were going to go to Richmond in 2020 before COVID struck, and it was on the schedule and dropped off it, and it's never reappeared. Dare I say, the Charlotte Roval. We need some races on the East Coast in a bad way. Today or this afternoon we've had kind of IndyCar by the numbers in terms of television, and most of the televisual viewing is sort of central, isn't it, from what we can see from the numbers. But a couple more races out east, maybe another race in Canada. This Argentina thing is probably going to happen. Maybe we can get back to Brazil at some point. Mexico would be good too. Obviously, with the Pato Award factor, that's kind of something that should have happened already by now, I feel like, and just kind of hasn't. And it looks like it's been overtaken by this Argentina idea.
Yeah, Matt, I agree with you 100% on Mexico. I think IndyCar really needs to go to Mexico if we are going to prioritize an international round. Pato O'Ward is currently one of the most popular drivers in the NTT IndyCar series. Do you guys not see his following when he goes to the racetrack? He has fans that are absolutely flocking behind him in large numbers. I think if you have an IndyCar race in Mexico, it's going to be a huge hit, and Pato O'Ward alone can really help push that forward. So I think an IndyCar race in Mexico would be a really, really great idea. It reminds me of a young Elio Castroneves and all the fanfare that he had throughout his IndyCar career and all of that. And going back to what you were saying in the chat, Matthew Owens definitely would love to see an IndyCar race at the Charlotte Roval. Remember several years ago, I saw Joseph Newgarden test an IndyCar there, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in real life, of seeing how fast the IndyCar was going through the infield section of the Roval. And in my neck of the woods here in North Carolina, it's really difficult to try to go to IndyCar races. So bring it to my own backyard. I'll be glad to go check it out and all of that. I also got some more comments from Adam Lemery. And when you heard about the IndyCar All-Star race, you couldn't believe it. Yeah, I think most of us couldn't believe it. And you suggest that IndyCar return to New Hampshire Motor Speedway because why not? Good track. Yeah, IndyCar does have history at New Hampshire also decided when Will Power did his double Texas salute and Tony Kanaan flipped over. Remember that race, and it started raining, and that was just one really chaotic event. And Adam is also suggesting IndyCar at Surfers Paradise with supercars. Adam, and I'm glad you brought that up, because if we're talking about having a postseason exhibition event, Surfers Paradise would be the perfect time, because it would be after the IndyCar season ended. All the supercars fans will get to see Scott McLaughlin. They get to see the other heroes, Will Power, Scott Dixon as well. I think that would be a really great venue for an off-season exhibition event at Surfers Paradise. And getting back to the question, I really do think IndyCar should prioritize other things, like we're saying, bringing more ovals. Now, Marshall Pruitt in his reporting with Racer.com has been saying there's a strong possibility that we are going to get a new oval next year, which could be the Milwaukee Mile, which is great. Mm-hmm. I still think there's obviously some room for improvement, in terms of geography and where these races are located. I know Ben's probably going to talk about East Coast races in a little bit. I agree that we need to go back to Watkins Glen and see what else we have up there on the East Coast. Maybe they add another street race to the calendar. I know some people have been flirting with Pittsburgh as a potential location. And I know IndyCar fans don't want to talk about Boston because we're not even going to go there. But Baltimore, that was an interesting street race as well. So I guess we'll see what IndyCar decides to do in the future.
Still, I guess my legal home permanent is in Delaware. I've since relocated back up to the New England area. But let me just tell you what this area has lost over the last several years or so. We're supposed to get Richmond back. That didn't happen. We've lost Pocono. We lost the street race in Baltimore. We lost Watkins Glen. We lost New Hampshire. Like Kobe mentioned, I don't even think we want to bring up Boston or go there. I guess it's worth mentioning they did race at Dover a couple times as well. Nazareth is long gone. It's near and dear to my heart. I know it's never coming back, but stop me whenever you like. And then IndyCar announces we have the Thermal Club. We might be going back to the Milwaukee Mile, even though we have a bunch of races. And that's great, by the way. Bring back the Milwaukee Mile. I'm all for that. But the Midwest, you guys are spoiled out there. Do you want to know what the closest IndyCar track to my current location where I am right now? Do you know what it is? It's in Toronto. It's not even in the United States of America. So there are so many good tracks in the Northeast, so many good tracks in the Mid-Atlantic that we could be going to for this series, and not just all those road courses like Watkins Glen as well. I don't understand. Why don't we try to prioritize that a little bit more? Get this market back onto the schedule in some capacity. I don't care if I have to drive 4 hours. I've never been to an IndyCar race. It's on my bucket list. I'd love to go. I'd love to make it to the 500 someday. But it would have been a lot easier. Back in the day when you had the street race in Baltimore, I wouldn't have minded making the 4.5 hour drive to Richmond, whatever it was. Was thrilled to see that added back to the schedule. And then the pandemic happened. And I feel like we're mostly out of the lockdowns and restrictions at the very least. We're certainly out of those in this pandemic era. I think we could certainly justify bringing Richmond back at this point. Why haven't we gone to the negotiating table to try to make that happen? There are so many good tracks, so many good candidates, and yet here we are talking about the Thermal Club and maybe making the teams. And talk about the cost for the teams as well. It costs a lot more money to ship everything to get to an international track than it does to a country to a track here in your home country of the United States. I don't know. I know I'm beating a dead horse. I know people have been talking about this for years, but that map that NASCAR man put together, it doesn't lie. This region is totally underappreciated. There you go. Thank you, Kobe. Look at that. There's not a green state in sight on the entire New England area, the Mid-Atlantic region, and even Kobe, like you were saying, your neck of the woods. I don't know if the Nashville street circuit's the closest to you or if it's Barber or whatever, but you don't exactly have an IndyCar track down the street from where you are either. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of people that live on the East Coast, a lot of IndyCar fans that live on the East Coast. Let's try to get them a race again. And then once we get the schedule sorted a little bit more and have some fair representation of these tracks all throughout the country, okay, let's talk about maybe going to Argentina, showing those fans some love for an exhibition race or going back to Surfers Paradise or whatever. But as of right now, I think we prioritize the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast.